What I'm looking for in a bank is one that's looking out for me, like NBT. I want a relationship and a team that supports me in my dreams. And when life gets challenging, I need a bank that's focused on what matters. Not to mention one that's been top rated by Forbes in trust, customer service, financial advice, and more. That's why when it comes to meeting my banking needs, it's always NBT. Learn more at nbtbank.com. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in. This is Tom Hickey from 2020 Media, and you are listening to NBT Bank's On the Scene podcast, reaching over 250,000 readers of the Jewish Ledger, weha.com, and West Hartford Magazine, live 24/7, 365. And before we introduce our guest today, let me start by saying hello to my co-host, Bob Carr. Good morning, Bob. Or
Morning,
good day, I should say. We don't know if
it'll be a good day. I know you can listen
It'll
to any time of the day, but we're going to say good morning because that's where we are. Tom Hickey, along with myself, Coach McCarty, and Ronnie Newton, is a founder and partner in weha.com. Tom brings to West Hartford the Connecticut Jewish Ledger, West Hartford Magazine, which is West Hartford's original lifestyle magazine, the various tastes of West Hartford, the best of West Hartford, which will be celebrating its 11th anniversary this fall, and other fun events throughout the year. Our podcast is assembled and posted by the Modern Observer Group of Middletown, Connecticut. And today our guest is Yvonne Alston, founder of Indelible Impressions Consulting, LLC. Good morning, Yvonne.
Good morning, Bob and Tom. I'm really glad to be here with you all to have this conversation today. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So just a brief introduction. Can you introduce yourself to the audience and let them know who you are and what you've done? And
Awesome. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder, CEO, and chief culture architect for Indelible Impression Consulting. We're a firm that's really dedicated to developing inclusive organizational cultures and transformative leaders. Myself and the team really do this work by advancing important competencies that focus on helping individuals, groups, and organizations really understand the importance of identity and culture and their impact on the human experience. So we do this work through capacity building, learning, leadership, and professional development. And we also hold and facilitate critical community conversations that move change through communities that really need it. And so whether that's for a nonprofit entity, for-profit, academic institution, community organization, we really help these folks not only adapt to change, but lead it, right? Really leaving a lasting impression, an indelible impression, if you will.
so
on the name, there we go.
Right? Yeah, that's right, exactly. So on the community aspects of what you do, so kind of expand that a little bit. What's a community conversation look like for, say, a for-profit, for a business?
Yeah, so the community conversations are really more focused on community organizations, right? So not necessarily for-profit organizations, companies, employer groups, but much more if there's an NAACP or there's a West Hartford Chamber of Commerce, right? Conversation. If there's any particular group that wants to hold a conversation meaningfully, perhaps they want to have someone come in and facilitate that because of a certain skill set. Perhaps they want to collect some data around that so that they can derive some actionable items out of that to create change. That's part of what we do.
Okay. So one of the things is when we started chatting, so Yvonne and I met at the Celebrate West Hartford. We were both there. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning helping the folks.
Oh, yeah.
Crafts,
It was
arts and
super
crafts
early.
people.
Coffee in hand.
Yeah, exactly. And we had some downtime in between. So one of the things we got into was Yvonne was explaining what she did, and I had always considered my employment transactional, in the sense that I owed my employer nothing more than a hard day's work. Since I was a commissioned salesman, they owed me my commissions, and that was it. And we got into a different conversation about. And I'm going to step back on that one a second. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been doing some research for our podcast today. And one of the things I noticed on LinkedIn among folks my age or slightly younger, 10 years younger or so, that they're having a really hard time finding positions and no one responds to them. And then the flip side of that, there is that idea that Gen Z, which I'm not quite sure what generation that is, but that Gen Z doesn't respond or ghosts employers. And I think that comes down to that transactional nature. How do you work with data, and how do you work with your organizations to combat that, dehumanization of people?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important first to identify what is the difference between a transactional employer and a human-centric employer, right? So, based on what you said, you're correct that employment is more of an exchange, right? Labor for pay. Relationships are typically governed by contracts, metrics, compliance, not always by trust or mutual growth. People are very much seen as resources or perhaps even cogs in a machine, if you will, and valued primarily for their output and efficiency. However, human-centric employers see them as whole humans, as individuals with emotions, aspirations, intrinsic worth, if you will. So, rooted in like theory Y and human-centered principles, this prioritizes dignity, autonomy, empathy, and shared purpose. These type of organizations really invest in relationships, well-being, and co-creation, and not just tasks or even KPIs. And so it's really important to distinguish the difference, right? And I think a big part of that is that what people have come to understand about how much time they're spending at work, all that they're giving to their employers, that they want more. They have an expectation of receiving more. And so that kind of robotic, almost transactional dynamic that has happened has contributed significantly to burnout, to mental health challenges, to lack of empathy and compassion for the human being that is dedicating majority of their waking hours to an employer group, to one's institution. And so I think people have come back, especially post-COVID, and said, you know what? Like my whole world came to a screeching halt. My whole life, I took stock of it. I took inventory of it. Maybe I really don't love going to work every day for a leader that treats me like crap and just talks to me any old kind of way because because they're in a leadership position and they know I need the job to pay the mortgage and keep food on the table and clothes on the kids' back kind of thing. And they really started to push back and said, well, wait a minute here. My life matters. And so they came back and they charged employer groups with saying, no, 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 no. The transactional element is over. You need to see me as a whole human being worthy of dignity and respect. And I'm going to require that of you. And so that becomes part of the great exchange between an employee and employer.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, you work for some huge corporations.
I was just going to say, and what do you do if that doesn't happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you see what you saw that was phrased as the Great Resignation, right? Is that people came back and people said, you know what? My life was at risk, my family's life, my loved ones, maybe we even lost some loved ones, right? And so it gave me a very different lens and perspective. So this is now what I would like. And when employer groups said, no, we're sticking to the formula that we've always used, you saw a mass exodus of employees who actually chose themselves. And so what happened is from that mass exodus, it contributed to those who remained, with those organizations, significant burnout, doing the most with the least, which is usually a phenomenon of nonprofit organizations, but then became a phenomenon of many different types of organizations and institutions. And so that's, I think, gave a lot more rise to needing folks, perhaps like myself, not that we didn't exist prior, but I think it shined a brighter light on things, as well as the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and that summer of kind of racial reckoning that translated across the globe. That, they were calling on folks like us to say, hey, how do we navigate this? And how do we connect more with our people in meaningful ways? Now, I have to say that there are some organizations that did that performatively as a check the box exercise. And there were others that really said, hey, we're holding the mirror to ourselves. We understand that we've kind of operated in one particular system and way of thinking for long enough. It's a new day. There are new dynamics. There are new needs. And we'd like some guidance on how to navigate that.
So if you heard about a company, Yvonne, that could use your services, that really needs your services,
Yeah.
this is not a very good word, but I'm going to say it. How do you infiltrate? How do you get in there? Realizing that
Yeah.
company X needs my help, to take them to better understand and be more global, about their thinking.
Sure. So as Bob and I were talking the day that we were volunteering, Indelible Impressions has really had the benefit of the greatest marketing tool in existence, which is word of mouth. Because of our track record, because of our data, because of our ability to create real transformation, a lot of times folks seek us out or they're in conversation with others and denoting what they're kind of battling with. And folks and this is based on what I've heard and my teammates have heard, that they're like, do you know about indelible impressions? Have you met Yvonne Alston? Let me connect you. And so a lot of times that's how it happens. And if it's I hear of something where I'm in conversation and in community with folks, I'll just say, well, you know what, feel free to connect me with them. If you think that that would be fortuitous, if you think that I can be of help and of service. And that's really what it comes down to, is myself and my team. And I do have a privilege of leading some folks across the United States doing this work for profits, nonprofits, academic institutions, governmental entities. We really want to be of service. This isn't about dollars and cents. This is about our fellow humans. This is about wanting people to have an exceptional experience in their lives that translates well beyond a workplace into society. And us at Indelible Impressions doing our part in that.
We're going to keep talking, but before I forget to have you do this, how do people reach you, Yvonne? Email,
Sure.
number, website, what's easiest?
Oh, all the good stuff. So definitely available on the web, indelible-consulting.com. I'm on LinkedIn. We do quite a bit of publishing on LinkedIn and doing our best to drive important conversations. We're also a member of the West Hartford Chamber of Commerce. One person actually came to me probably about a year ago and said, I Googled you. And I was like, oh, that's kind of scary. But the good thing is that we have enough content out there that our content is out in the world. So that's really cool. So there's a lot of different ways to get in touch with myself and Indelible Impressions, have exploratory conversations, and just, chat about what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and how we can support.
Great. Thank you.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, so what does the data say? I mean, what does the data tell you about your approach to with employers or with organizations, and how does it move that? Most people are looking for profitability and or efficient organization. So what does your data tell you about what your approach does?
So our approach, it usually, if we're looking at like culture transformation, let's say, of an organization, we use data in really important ways, right? So depending on, the organization that we're partnering with, our data aren't just numbers, they're really a narrative, right? So it tells a story of lived and professional experiences, gaps and opportunities, and what's really needed for meaningful change. We use it as a compass to ground our work in reality. And so the data collection, the analysis are both qualitative and quantitative. We use surveys, focus groups, interviews, really to help us unearth root causes and not just symptoms of what's happening within the organization. whether that's really good or not so great. And then from there, the data really enables us to design strategies that are inclusive and fair and also sustainable. As we're doing the work after we've collected the data and we say, hey, this is what we now understand about your organization, and here's what the data tells us that you need, so to speak, as an intervention or to get us to outcomes. We have that executive report out, tell that story, and agree on partnership and meaningful partnership, not just buy-in from a sign the contract and write the check, but hey, we're going to be working with every level of your organization. That sometimes includes board of directors, C-suite for sure, mid-level leaders, individual contributors, so we can systemize shared language, shared understanding, and also something that sometimes can be a little bit intimidating, which is shared accountability, because that's really important if we are to realize true transformation of an organization. And then with the interventions, we collect data along the way, comparing it to our benchmarks to confirm growth, to really help identify any speed bumps to progress and to allow us to pivot as needed so we can guide clients toward transformation with intention and not just assumptions.
What do you do if they don't change, Yvonne? What if you're in an environment, is it just time, or yeah,
time is a factor, intentionality is a factor, relatability is a factor, right? So how we engage the client really matters. Since we don't do check the box, we're not interested in partnering with organizations that are doing it for performative purposes, right? For PR or because they have a lawsuit looming, and so forth, right? So we make those kind of ground rules clear from the very beginning. Oftentimes our work is multi-year, it's multifaceted. And because we're collecting data along the way, we know how to navigate, right? Remembering that we use data as that compass. And so if there's something where we're realizing that it's not working, we start to discuss why. And that accountability piece too is really key. Employer groups are not just accountable to one another, but there is a reciprocity between Indelible and the organization for us to say, listen, we want you to have this experience. We want to deliver that, but that's going to require something of you. That is going to require intentionality. It's going to require discomfort. It's going to require a heck of a lot of courage to acknowledge what is, what isn't, and partner in a way that's not punitive, but that helps us to really get after it, right? Get down into those roots. As I like to say, we don't just get under the hood, using a car analogy, we get all up in your chassis, right? We want to know what's going on. We're tinkering everywhere. And so it is very rare that we are unable to effect change. Now, when I say affect change, I'm talking systemically throughout the organization. Will you have individuals who are resistant to change? Absolutely. And how that's
because we
dealt
are
with
in
by
New England after all, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
like change. Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes it's really interesting, right? Because change is personal on many levels, right? Is thinking, feelings, and behaviors and how those integrate and align. I will also say that, depending on people, how they were socialized, is oftentimes a contributing factor to their resistance or rigidity to change. And so I might work with those people one-on-one to better understand, you seem to be struggling with X. Talk to me about that, or talk to whoever the lead consultant is. What is that about? Does that have anything to do with perhaps how you grew up? What your exposures were? Does geography play a role? Do faith systems or none at all contribute? Is there socioeconomic conditions? Like trying to understand so that people can better understand themselves. Where are the kind of barriers? And we try to calibrate our stride to walk alongside them to get to the other side. But if they don't want to do that for whatever the reason is, then I think the employer has some decisions to make, right? How much of that resistance and rigidity contributes to a negative workplace experience for others? If you've got somebody who's been identified, so to speak, as a toxic leader and they're not willing to change, well, we might do a little bit of an analysis of, okay, well, what's the impact of that leader on your org, right? If they're driving their teams, to mental health challenges, if people are getting burnt out, if you're having a real problem with retention on that team because you have a leader who's just burning people out and people are, coming through and quitting and coming through and quitting or jumping to another team or department, I think an employer has a responsibility to look at that individual and say, they might bring in great business, but they're also costing us something. And quantifying that can be very eye-opening for employers. Or they can say, hey, listen, as I've heard many CEOs say, this is where the train is going. This is the track we're on. So get on or get off at the next stop. But this is where we're going because we understand the value of being human-centric. We understand that it has a direct impact on productivity, on efficiency, effectiveness, profitability, right? So when we're talking about things like diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility, justice, all of that is quantifiable for an employer. So when you understand that and you really start looking at things like attrition and you start looking at lost opportunity, misses on business, right? You start to look at, well, what's happening internally that's contributing to that? And if it's people, then either we've got some work to do, or perhaps this might not be the best place for those individuals and making a decision.
Great.
I know
Not
that
easy one, making a decision, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things it's just an interesting conversation. I went a few things that I thought about when we were talking, and actually, work for organizations, although I probably was more transactional than they were, that were more inclusive. Work for organizations where the DEI wasn't just a bunch of letters. It was actually just their mantra was to hire the best person, to hire the person that I think the word was
Meritocracy.
are they well yeah well no are they qualifiable or so we had people. I worked in an
Qualified.
organization. Yeah, so I had an organization, worked for an organization that had hired people who were qualifiable. So they had people of a variety of different backgrounds, people who were released from prison, and people who would not normally fall into the category of hireable because they had language issues. Their English was not their first language, and it wasn't even good when they tried to speak it. But they still had management positions in certain and there's one organization I work for, which is interesting to see because it ran much more like a clock. It ran a much better way, and there wasn't conflict. Really wasn't allowed. That was just the owner. The way the owner operated was he didn't believe in conflict. So we had some conflict, he and I, over that. But
conflict can be good. There's a thing called positive conflict. I mean, that's what challenges environments. That's the best ideas. The best solutions are born out of positive conflict.
Sometimes that's true, or sometimes you get fired. But
well, then the conflict's not so positive, right?
Right, that's true.
That's the difference.
But one of the things you mentioned earlier, like employees say surveys. I've worked with organizations that did employee surveys, kind of check the box kind of thing. And and I know we're running out of time a little bit here, but how does that negatively impact when you actually do some work with employees?
Yeah.
And you don't follow through, like they don't get any information back from management.
It's a death.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think employers, I've always said, and I've said this actually on stages directly to audience members and employer groups. Listen, don't collect the data if you're not going to use it meaningfully. Just don't. Because the bottom line is when you're doing employee surveys of any kind, whether it's through an organization like Indelible or it's just your internal process, and hopefully organizations are doing that on an annual basis. If you're going to collect it, your employees, first of all, you're asking them to be honest, right? Which, if it's not anonymous, doesn't feel so great, right? And it's very hard for people to be very transparent and honest about what their experience is in the workplace. So one, making the survey fully anonymous so that people can say what's really happening. Two, if you're going to collect it and you're going to get that data, your employees are trusting that you're going to do something with it, not cherry pick what is most comfortable, what is most kind of beneficial to profitability of the organization, but is what's most beneficial to the people in the organization. Because if they are treated well, there's enough data to support the fact that they actually will perform at a higher level. You will have higher level profitability. So using that data, as I've mentioned, as a compass, where do we need to go? What do we need to do? What needs to change? And then going back to your people. And this is really key. When you get that data back, maybe it doesn't feel so great, right? It shines a really bright light on that chassis. So be honest with your people, because at the end of the day, they're already experiencing it. They know. And more than likely, they're talking to each other, right? So everybody knows what's broken in the shop. Trying to tiptoe and act like there's a big shard of glass on the ground, that doesn't benefit anybody. Right? So just own it, know what it is, and then make some commitments. Make some commitments and hold yourselves accountable to those changes, and bring folks in to help develop solutions. I mean, if these are the people who are experiencing these pain points, well, more than likely, they're the people who know what might work to help fix it. So bring them to the table in those conversations and say, what do you need, right? What's within reason? What do you need to be most productive, to have a greater sense of fulfillment and connection with the mission, vision, and values of our organization? And how can we partner with you to realize that, which then benefits us from a brand reputation standpoint, from a profitability standpoint? That way you can realize individual success, we realize organizational success. And for larger organizations, then you have stakeholder and shareholder happiness. So it all works together for good. But you've got to be honest about where it's at, where it's not, and get after what needs to be done.
Well, Yvonne, Bob said it earlier. We are out of time, so we're going to have you come back. But in the
Sure.
meantime, if people do want to make a commitment to change,
Yeah.
or whatever it might be, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so the website, indelible-consulting.com, LinkedIn, Yvonne M. Alston at Indelible Impressions Consulting is one way. We have on our website a contact form that's available as well. So there's no shortage of getting in touch with us. What I would say is for those that are interested, be intentional. Be really intentional. Also know that we work with organizations of all sizes, and different capacities, even financially. We understand that there's a lot going on in the world, and a lot of organizations are pressed financially. This work, I dare say, is too important not to invest in. And as a result, we have equity-based rates based on the size of the organization and whether or not they're a municipality or a academic institution or nonprofit. And for us at Indelible, it will always be about the work, right? Being able to do good work with folks. So give us a shout. Let's have a conversation, figure it out how we can partner effectively, and move your people and your workplace forward.
Beautiful. Great. Thanks so much for your time, Yvonne. And we will be looking for you out and about and on the scene. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much for having me in this conversation. It's an important one. I appreciate it. And kudos to weha.com. You guys are doing great work, and we all appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
We'll take that plug, right, Bob? We'll take it.
What I'm looking for in a bank is one that's looking out for me, like NBT. I want a relationship and a team that supports me in my dreams. And when life gets challenging, I need a bank that's focused on what matters. Not to mention one that's been top rated by Forbes in trust, customer service, financial advice, and more. That's why when it comes to meeting my banking needs, it's always NBT. Learn more at nbtbank.com. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.